Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and as you are hearing this, I am off on my Alaska cruise. I've been busy booking excursions, meals, and shows, and it should be the trip of a lifetime. To tell you the truth, I've never wanted to go on a cruise before. Being stuck on a boat for a week with 3,000 other people has never sounded fun. But I'm going, and I'll tell you, while I can't wait to see Alaska, I'm most excited about the food on the boat. My plan is to try to eat as much crab and lobster as possible. For breakfast, lunch, and dinner, this is what I'm going to eat. As far as drinks go, we have the unlimited package. So, with all the time I should have on my hands at sea, I'll be drinking my fair share, I'm sure. So while I've never thought I was a cruise guy, I'm doing it, and I'm pumped to see Alaska with my dad, brother, sister, and son. It's going to be some great bonding time. And I'm bummed that my wife can't make the trip, but she only gets so much vacation time and she's going to Mexico on a girls' trip in August for her 40th birthday, so she's skipping this one. What I'm least excited for on this trip is COVID. I have a feeling that it's going to be on the ship, and I anticipate getting it by Thursday or Friday. And even though everybody will be tested 72 hours before we board, this boat has super spreader potential, so wish me luck. Another event with super spreader potential was Outdoor Retailer, and my guest this week is one of the COVID casualties. And when I say that, I mean Nick Sargent, the current president of the SIA, got COVID at the OR show and lived a podcast about it. I'm not going to spoil anything about the show, as this is a good one and an important one to the ski and snowboard industry, as SIA was once one of the most important groups in snow business, and Nick and I talk all things SIA, Burton, Salomon, and being a ski tech on the World Cup. It's an informative one that every single person in snow must listen to. Before we get into it, I want to ask you to tell a friend about the show, and if you happen to see someone ask for a recommendation for a good podcast on social media, please tag the Powell movement. That kind of stuff really helps the show grow. Finally, I want to thank my amazing sponsors for their continued support. Please check out these brands and buy their products, as I only work with the best. The people that make the Powell movement happen are Stanley, the 10 Barrel Brewery, Elon Skis, Rollerblade, and Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Now, let's talk with Nick Sargent. You are just back from the OR trade show, and I opted out of the trade show based on how it was the past few shows. Can you give us a quick trade show report?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I have COVID.
Oh man, that sucks.
I don't know if it was an official super spreader event, but that was a bummer for a takeaway. I will say, all things aside, there was a renewed vibrancy. I think the industry was really stoked to be together. Everyone seeing each other, and it certainly had that vibe of, okay, we're back. This is cool. But, unfortunately, it was a much smaller summer OR. It was just that top floor above the escalator.
So similar to last year?
Similar to last year. It was about 3/4 of that space. They had an air wall blocking off kind of the back end of the space, making it look a little more compact and tight. A lot of CBD, a lot of water bottles, reusable cups and mugs. I think the biggest footprint I saw was Fjallraven. They had a pretty impressive footprint in a booth. Surprisingly, I saw, Hurley was there. They had a pretty good booth.
Was it the Hurley license brand that has been there for a while, or was it actually Hurley?
Yeah, I couldn't tell. I don't know if I know the difference, to be honest.
All the paddle boards and stuff are licensed.
Yep. So it was the same old. All the big brands were not showing. And it really felt like a medium to small brand accessory show, as opposed to Outdoor Retailer, what we're used to. But again, I think on a number of levels, it's telling of kind of where we are as an industry, where we are as a business, and where we are in this kind of, I don't want to say sans COVID, because I'm sitting here with it right now.
Right.
But, kind of beyond COVID and kind of, taking that move towards normalcy. But I didn't see any new people. That was probably the other thing. It was the old guard.
Yep.
And great to see friends, great to see colleagues, great to see old people. And everyone's kind of looking around like, okay, is this it? Is this the new norm? Is this what we can expect? So that's kind of my report on it. And yeah, it was really light. I think if you could classify kind of like OR light, sugar-free,
Right.
caffeine-free. That's kind of putting it into drink analogies here. I think that's what you could expect.
Well, fair enough. Well, we're going to talk a lot more about trade shows in a bit, but first it's time to talk about your life and times. And did you grow up at Stowe, or were you a weekend warrior there?
Well, I guess technically I was a weekend warrior because I grew up in the town next door.
I mean, that's close enough for me to say that you grew up at Stowe.
I grew up in Stowe. I grew up just 10 miles north in a little town called Morrisville. And my family's been there for a long time, multiple generations. So Stowe was my backyard, and that's where my friends are and still are today. I went to school, high school there, and I skied at Stowe every weekend. My parents would drop us off, old school 70s style, drop you off at 8, pick you up at 4.
Right.
We were the kids running around eating the saltines and stomping on ketchup packs, watching the spray and, poaching Sprite, posing as water as you walk through the cafeteria and, just basically a resort brat.
Yep.
And, having fun with it, but, really making lasting memories, skiing and, Stowe's a skier's mountain and it has everything. So much fun just skiing with your buddies, being mischievous, and just enjoying being a kid in a really cool resort town.
And when you're coming up, it's also when snowboarding is coming up in New England, and you're kind of there for the beginning of it, I would think. And it sounds like you buy your first snowboard at a general store. How much were you involved in snowboarding growing up, or was it mainly all skiing?
My life was primarily ski, and being a product of the 70s and getting into skiing. And I had my aunt and uncle didn't have any children, and they would take my older brother and I out to do some fun things and experience what it was like to be a parent for an afternoon.
Right.
And certainly they were probably stoked to drop us off and give us back to our parents. But they got my brother and I into Nordic skiing when we were young, 6 or 7 maybe. And I really gravitated towards it. I thought it was fun. We lived in the country. We could Nordic ski all over creation. I used to Nordic ski to school, leave my skis on the side of the building.
That's pretty cool.
And then Nordic ski home as a kid. And then my parents got us into alpine skiing right around the same time. And that was a whole new freedom. And couldn't believe that you could go and ski the entire mountain. It's like, when you get your bike for the first time and you get to go cruise around town. But then I remember a really good friend of mine, actually Wendy Fisher, her husband, Woody, he and I grew up together. And I heard her podcast with you and got a couple laughs out of that. But anyway, he got a snowboard, and it was one of those things that was like, holy shit, what is that? I want one of those. And it happened to be right around my birthday. So I convinced my dad to get me a back hill at Shaw's General Store, which is the main retailer right in downtown Stowe, which he did. Very fortunate. And we used to hike Spruce Peak after skiing and during our lunch break. We were ski racing at the time, and we would ride under the lift where there was powder. And I vividly remember, one, we were horrible at it, and we ate shit more than we were going down the hill.
Right.
But I vividly remember, this is cool. This sensation of riding powder was really awesome. And, at nights we were hiking hills and we were riding through the woods on our snowboards. And unfortunately for us, it was more of a novelty. It wasn't a lifestyle at that point.
Ski racing is the lifestyle, and that's what you do on the side?
That's right. And that was kind of what everyone did. Snowboarding was so new. I mean, so new. It was like your sled. You put it on the porch and you used it when you had nothing to do. But there were some memorable faces and bodies that were in Stowe at the time. Bud Keene, for example, Shaun White's Olympic coach.
Yep. A living legend.
Living legend, coach of the stars. I remember Bud, I think the first day I laid eyes on him would probably be 80, 81. And he was a snowboard instructor at Stowe. I mean, it was their first year of having snowboard instruction. And a guy named Lowell, a big, tall, blonde fella who was driving the snowboard lessons. And I remember looking at these guys, and they were great guys and super cool, and it was fun to watch. And Stowe was small, so we got to know each other. But I was always kind of curious, just like, man, what's going on over there? That's kind of cool. But I was kind of hook, line, and sinker into ski racing. So I was doing my ski racing thing, but kind of had a drifting right eye over at the snowboarding ski school, just trying to figure out what was going on. And it was a cool time. It was a really cool time. And Certainly Stowe was right at the forefront of snowboarding at that time, but it was also a hotbed for ski racing.
Yeah, I mean, the whole New England scene.
Absolutely. It was pretty intense time.
And with ski racing, it's something where when you finally pick a college, you end up going to Western State. But was ski racing something you were good enough where when you went to Western State, you were racing in college? Or did you pick Western State just to be in Crested Butte and to shred the gnarly stuff that everybody's talking about?
I don't think I even knew what the gnarly stuff was when I applied to Western State. I went there sight unseen,
Okay.
and a really good friend of mine shared the brochure with me my senior year in high school. And she was like, I'm going to apply to this school. Maybe you want to apply to it. I was like, sure, that sounds fun. And at that point, I wanted to get as far away from Vermont as I could. And fortunately, I was a mediocre to okay, good ski racer. And I got into the school. I got a scholarship to ski race.
Oh, sick.
And my mom flew me out, dropped me off at school, packed me into my dorm room, said, if you flunk out, you're on your own. Good luck. We love you. Enjoy your college. 16 months later, I flunked out. Scholarship dried up. School invited me to take some time off.
That's nice of them.
Very nice of them. And my parents cut me off 100%. So I had to sink or swim on my own. So I learned a very valuable lesson on how to survive and live on minimum means. I had an older brother who was in the military and had a little money, and he helped me out to get me started. Anyway, long story short, I worked myself back into school, got the scholarship back, and finished at Western State and ski raced the whole time, and really enjoyed it.
All right. Well, that kind of teaches you a big lesson of like, hey, I don't want to be poor and be in the doldrums of the world, is my guess. But another thing that you're able to do, which is a dream for anybody, I would think, is you land a job with Dynastar out of college. And I think you're a ski tech or a race tech, and you're traveling the world in Europe. And how does that opportunity even come up for you?
Oh, man. This is probably one of my best life lessons, which was I finished college. I got a job in Park City, Utah, from a really good friend of mine who I had met in Crested Butte, tuning skis. And this guy had worked at Dynastar and had worked doing World Cup service. And I kind of targeted that as a goal. Like, that sounds fun. Can you teach me how to tune skis at a very high level? Which he agreed to do. So I spent 2 years learning the craft of ski tuning. And at the same time, I was also getting introductions to a lot of the winter sport leadership, specifically in race departments with Salomon and Vocal and Rosignol and Dynastar, and getting exposure with these individuals. And specifically, I gravitated towards Dynastar, and I called the director of racing every Friday at 2:00 my time. And, 50% of the time I went right to voicemail. The other 50% he would pick up. So for a year, I called this guy. And after a year, the guy's like, okay, you're pretty persistent. I think we're going to hire you. So they offered me a job to do race service. So that's how I got into the industry. And then I spent time in Europe and in other parts of the world tuning skis for World Cup athletes.
So you're like the master tuner where you know all the different cross hatches and all the different waxes, and you know how to make people go faster than anybody else, you feel like?
I was pretty good. I wasn't the best. There's a lot of variables that come into play. Base material, grinds, snow crystals, humidity, precipitation, actual time that you're on snow, the athlete for that 60 seconds, did the sun go behind the clouds? Is the sun baking the snow? All these different variables that you're having to work with. And then on top of that, you've got the athlete. Is the athlete feeling it? Is it the athlete's day? So you're trying to manage and judge the variables to the best of your ability. And a lot of the ski tuning is repetition and going back to the same venue time and time again. And you get to know the snow, you get to know the piste, you get to know the time of year you're there, you get to know the humidity. And more importantly, you get to know your own quiver of race skis that you travel with to know what is going to be the best ski in that region, in that zone, that time of year, and that day. So there's a lot that goes into it. And there were guys that were much better than I was. So I was learning the whole time. I had some success, which was great. and I had more failures, which was actually even better because you learn every time.
Is it a pretty thankless job when you're out there just tuning people's skis? Is it people just looking at you like a shop guy, like, hey, get me my skis ready? Or are they looking at you more as like a caddy who has an intense knowledge of everything that's going on the course?
It's kind of, you got a couple athletes that are prima donnas and they treat you like you're just the dude carrying their skis. And when something doesn't work, it's your fault. Very thankless. But then you align with athletes where you really become the caddy, where you are a part of the game on game day. You're giving advice. You are busting your balls. You know, you're working 20 hours a day, every day, no day off for months. And you're traveling and you're setting up, you're tearing down, you know, you're tuning. A light day would be maybe 10 pair of skis. Heavy day would be 20. And you're constantly rotating skis through the quiver and testing and trying new things. And then you document everything. I had a huge 3-ring binder. I had broken out for every stop in the World Cup, every time I was there, every stroke of the file, every stroke of the brush.
You're like a scientist.
Basically, a snow scientist. And you use your notes year over year, and you get better and better and better. And there were guys I was working with that had been doing this for 20 and 30 years. And, you know, I had been doing it for 3, 4, and 5 years. And I'm like, I think there's a higher calling for me. I don't think I want to be tuning skis the rest of my life. But this is really fun, really exciting, high paced, high charged. And then beyond that, the camaraderie in the white circus, as it's called, is really, really exciting, really fun. You know, you get to make some lifelong friends and have some amazing experiences at resorts all over the world that the kid from Morrisville, Vermont, I was watching on ABC Wide World of Sports. And now I'm there.
Right.
I'm actually in it. So that was really exciting. It was really exciting.
Yeah, it seems like a dream job, especially for that age, and you're traveling the world, living out of a suitcase, I'm sure. There's lots of parties when you guys do well, and then there's probably not when you guys don't do well. And it's probably a really just amazing time in life that sets you up for your next gig because you meet people all over the world and everybody within the race organizations you're getting to know. And the next thing that happens are the Olympics are coming to Salt Lake City, and your next big gig is with Salomon, and you have a unique title. You are the Olympic and Strategic Alliance Manager. Does this mean you handle all activations around the games and partnerships for the brand?
That's right. Yeah. So I worked myself into a job at Salomon, and the timing was perfect with the Olympics coming to Salt Lake City. I had lived in Park City a few times and had really strong connections and a really healthy network in and around Park City and Salt Lake, primarily through ski racing, the ski industry, my time in Park City. And ironically, I happened to be the most knowledgeable person at Salomon at that time for what we wanted to do. And at the time, Salomon was owned by Adidas.
Yes.
And it was Adidas Salomon. And I got to know a lot of people in the Adidas network. And so I created an opportunity, a hospitality hub in Park City to accommodate the needs, not only for Salomon, but for Adidas.
So that's real big time athletes and big time personalities coming for Adidas, I would think.
It's big time. It's huge. Certainly one of the biggest opportunities in my young career at the time. And I also knew the mayor of Park City at the time, who was an old neighbor and a friend. I bumped into him along the way, and he had said, oh, we've got this real estate that the IOC had originally consumed and has now given back to us. We're looking to rent it. Anybody you might know. So if you know Park City, it's the old Miners Hospital, which is right in the park, right in the very central of Park City.
Prime real estate for that event.
Prime real estate, prime location, walking distance to everywhere. And so long story short, we ended up securing that property, and the Olympic Committee had kind of given an island away in the middle of their zone and had foregone all the IOC rights. So we could do whatever we wanted. We built the contract that way, and we created this massive hospitality hub. And we had a restaurant serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We had a media hub. We had an entertainment zone. We had a meeting space, and we had a central gathering point. We did an amazing job. Like we froze product in ice cubes and we bought miners carts and made fire pits. And I did a deal with Volvo cars and we had 24 Volvo cars all logoed up driving around town.
Like experiential marketing before it even really was a big buzzword?
It was experiential marketing and guerrilla marketing before that was even a thing.
Okay.
We had a snow skate park when snow skates first came out. We were collecting data. I did a big deal with Sony. We had Vio computers and video cameras and TVs. We had a huge semi truck with a screen that popped out of the back. And I hijacked the Olympic feed purely by mistake and piped it into the big screen. So we had a viewing zone. We had wind blades and flags, and we used it as a way to entertain our retailer network, but also all of the global athletes. So we were flying in retailers every 48 hours, doing a 48-hour junket. And we had tickets to every event. And then we were hosting all the gold medal, silver and bronze medal parties. So we had athletes, we had medals. You could come get your photo with whomever was on the podium and represented Salomon and Adidas. So you could, get to hold the medal, put it around your neck, all that fun stuff.
That's pretty rad.
So we did this for Olympics are typically 16 days or something.
Yeah.
So I was there for, the month before building it out, the Olympics, the 16 days. And then, we closed it down. It probably took us 2 weeks. So I was there for that whole period. But I think the most important lesson I learned was at the time, Jacques Rogue was the IOC president. I was in my office working and the receptionist said, "Oh, there's some people here to see you." So I walked out and there was maybe 6 or 7 people in those god-awful knee-length Olympic jackets with the rings, certainly an older crowd. And a guy said, "Who's in charge?" And I said, "Well, I am." I said, "Well, we're here with the Olympic Committee and we represent everything Olympics. This is Jacques Rogue, the president of the Olympic Committee, and we are disappointed with what you're doing here. They didn't use the term guerrilla marketing, but you are stepping out of your boundary and you need to take all this stuff down. Otherwise, we're going to have to seek some legal action." And I don't know how I came up with this line, but I said to them, "Okay, great. Yep. Why don't you send me your complaint? I'll send it to my legal team and we'll get back to you in 2 weeks." There was maybe another 2 weeks of the games left. And I thought it was a cute answer. So they left and I got asked to attend a meeting later that day with Herbert Heiner. And he was the global CEO for Adidas and Salomon. This is the big guy. He's the Phil Knight of Adidas.
Right.
So I walk into a meeting and there's the CEO of Salomon. Herbert Heiner is there, the CEO of Salomon North America. And they invite me to sit down and they say, "Nick, we got a problem. Adidas is the title sponsor for the 2004 Summer Games in Greece. And we're getting the stiff arm pressure from IOC. We've stepped out of our boundary. This is way too much hype. You got to tone this down. Otherwise, we're going to have some big problems with our Greece activation." So I felt the strong arm of the IOC directly. So I said, "No problem." So we toned it down about a third, 30% maybe. And it was still out of the park. But it was an interesting lesson to feel the strength and the grip of IOC. And that's when I really understood how powerful that organization is.
It's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start things off with Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. This summer, make Peter Glenn your one-stop shop for all of your fun needs. Think everything you'll want or need for wakeboarding, inline skating, hiking, swimming. You get the idea. Peter Glenn has the best brands at the lowest prices. And if you find a lower price from a reputable storefront, Peter Glenn will match that price. There's a reason Peter Glenn has been around for over 60 years, and that's because they're the best. To find out more, head on over to peterglenn.com. My next sponsor is Rollerblade, and they pretty much invented the sport of inline skating, and it's no surprise that they make the most comfortable, high-performance skates out there. If you're already a skater, Check out the fit and finish of the 22 rollerblade line. It will have you skating further and faster than ever before. If you're a new skater, Rollerblade has you covered with skates that are engineered to keep you comfortable, having fun, and most importantly, in control. To find out more about the 2022 offering, head on over to rollerblade.com. My final sponsor this round is Stanley, the brand famous for that iconic bottle that kept your grandfather's coffee hot and his water ice cold. Well, Stanley still has that bottle, but they also have everything you're going to need this summer to go camping. Nothing else matches the quality of Stanley, and like your grandpa's water bottle, the camping cookware will last you a lifetime and create the memories that Stanley is proud to be a part of. I'm going to save you 30% on all of your Stanley gear. That's the best deal you're going to find anywhere. Head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and enter the code DRINKFAST. That's all one word, all lowercase, when you check out, and you'll get the Powell Movement deal. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. Your next gig is you go to Burton, and when you get to Burton, your title is the Vice President of Business Alliances. What does that actually mean?
Burton tracked me down, and they ended up hiring me really based on the success that I had with Adidas and Salomon, which was we had consumer tours at Adidas and Salomon. We had dealer intros. We had the Olympics. We had really big activations. And the opportunity that I found was there was a lot of non-endemic corporate dollars on the sidelines, meaning I could sell relationships to the brand for market offset or profitability. And so, as I had mentioned with the Olympics, I had done deals with Park City, the city, Volvo Cars, Sony, Labatt's Blue, Coca-Cola. I had a ton of other partners at the time. And I had a really good friend of mine who was the chief marketing officer at Burton. And Burton was really looking to come out of its shell of a very core, cool, niche brand to, we want to expose snowboarding to the masses so we can, in return, grow the brand, sell more product, make more money. So I was hired as a strategic alliance. I think originally I was a director maybe, to really look at the brand and find ways where I could monetize the brand.
Just partnering up with others?
Partnering up with other companies that wanted to be involved with snowboarding, willing to pay for snowboarding. And that was a revenue path for the company, but also it was a way to offset expenses. And they had events at the time, the U.S. Open snowboarding, the championships at Stratton, Vermont. They had consumer tours. They were making 60-minute snowboard videos before that was a thing. They had catalogs. They had photo shoots. They used athletes as their backdrop to promote the product, the lifestyle, the sport. So when I was exposed to all of the Burton assets, it was like Christmas come early. Like, oh my God, this is a target-rich environment. And no one at Burton really knew how to exploit the assets, with the exception of myself and a good buddy of mine, Brian Johnston, who went on to go work at UFC, GoPro, Nike Golf, and a few others. So we had this little vision. And so I hit the pavement, and out of the box, I did a huge deal with Mountain Dew, multi-million-dollar deal. I did a huge deal with Volvo. I did another big deal with some other companies. I can't recall who they were.
Garmin, Pepsi, 3M, Fox.
Oh, God, yeah, all those. Oh, you did some research.
Yeah.
Good on you. Yeah. And then there's a lot more. But long story short, I created a revenue stream. And this was before Facebook. This was before MySpace. So if you can imagine, we were right on the dawn of the digital era. And I was doing time buys with NBC, with Fox, with Eurosport, Canal Plus, trying to think of all the different media outlets I was doing around the world. ORF, anyway, whatever. And we ended up growing the U.S. Open footprint to create a feeder series into the U.S. Open. So we did the New Zealand Open, the Australian Open, the Japan Open, China Open, European Open. I'm probably missing a few other countries. So we had a global tour to, one, drive development of professional snowboarding, competitive snowboarding, create a series of content. So we were filming not just the competitive side of it, but the travel, the hotels, the lifestyle, the parties. And then we were able to take individual stories of athletes, whether it was Terry Hawkinson or Mikkel Bang or Shaun White, Danny Davis, Kevin Pierce, Luke Matrani, Jack Matrani, like Hannah Teeter, Kelly Clark. Oh man, I'm trying to go through the roster of athletes. There's so many.
So many.
So we ended up with just this massive catalog of content. And then MySpace happened. So I did a big deal with MySpace. And then Facebook happened. And we did a deal with Facebook. And then I heard that this energy drink out of Austria was creating a media platform, Red Bull Media House. We created a global distribution deal with Red Bull Media House. And this was before they were anything. And Mountain Dew, we did like a number of short documentaries with them, a number of different deals around the athletes, the sport, the drink. So, I mean, it was huge. So we were hitting the ball out of the park. And it kind of in the infancy, I was getting a lot of shit in the office. You're selling out the sport. You're selling out the brand.
The ski guy comes in here and sells our brand out to everybody else.
You're a ski guy, holy cow.
But then they get the budgets and they're like, holy shit, we can do so much with this ski guy's money.
That's exactly what happened. And I got to know Jake pretty well in those first few years. He wasn't around much. He was on his round the world holiday with his family. But once we got to know each other, he was like, oh, you're that guy. Holy shit, sell more. And it wasn't the initiative of sell more to exploit the brand, but he was like, this is amazing. Like, we're seeing the growth in the brand. We're seeing the excitement around snowboarding, and we're certainly seeing the money coming in the door. So he was really supportive of that. But there was a caveat, and I remember these words specifically: sell more, but don't fuck up my brand. He said that to me, and Jake had a really intense look when he would talk about the brand. And he looked me right in the eye. And it was like, aye, no problem. Understood. Message heard. So we kind of kept going down this path, and I was traveling some stupid amount, like 300,000 miles a year, 300 days a year.
It's crazy.
Crazy. And he was generous. He's like, you're bringing in the money. You're getting it done. You can travel first class all over the world. And I was like 40 years old.
Traveling first class, getting paid, and making a big difference in a sport that's not even your own sport.
That's right. But I will tell you, I learned the first day on the job, we flew to Breckenridge for a marketing retreat, and we partied that night. And I was super nervous. I'm like, I don't even know how to snowboard. I haven't snowboarded since I was a kid at Spruce Peak on a back hill in the late 70s, early 80s.
Right.
And here we are, 25 years later. And fortunately, everything at Burton started at noon. So I got up early. I went to ski school at Breckenridge, and Burton had these amazing programs at every ski school called Learn to Ride.
Yep.
So I'm like, who's your best snowboard instructor? Oh, this guy. I need a private lesson. I've got 3 hours to learn this sport. And these guys are looking at me with all the nicest, newest Burton stuff. Like, who the fuck is this guy? And I'm like, I'm a guy who just started at Burton, and I need to learn this sport in a couple hours. I'm super athletic. I'll learn this thing. And literally 2 runs, I was linking turns. 4 runs, I could stop and kick off the lift. So I rode for 2.5 hours, and I'm like, okay, I got this. And ran back to the meeting. The next day we snowboarded, and everyone's like, oh, you actually know how to snowboard? I'm like, second day, dude. But by the end of my time at Burton, I was hailing with everybody and hiking with Jake and, powder missions. And honestly, I've been heli skiing a ton, never with skis, only with snowboard. And I don't know if I would ever go back to heli ski with skis. It's that much fun on snowboard. But I'm really stoked I got to learn the sport. I got really good at it. And, it also helps when you're riding with the best snowboarders in the world.
Yeah, it pushes you.
Yeah, it pushes you, or the owner or the guy who virtually invented the sport, the few others. But at any rate, it was cool. It was really fun. And then we got to a point where we started doing a lot of product collaborations.
The Playboy stuff and shit like that.
The Playboy stuff, Paul Frank. I can't even remember all these brands that we
Grateful
did.
Dead. There was like any Danny Davis stuff.
Oh yeah, Star Wars, the kid Disney movies. I can't remember all those movies. And Pottery Barn, we made bedding for Pottery Barn teens. And that was probably one of the funniest ones I did. Pottery Barn reached out to me and like, hey, we want to do a Burton line of bedding, sheets and wall hangings and a whole bed set. So I went to Jake and I'm like, hey, I have this deal with Pottery Barn. He was like, no way, that's selling out. And I'm like, all right. So I shelved it, came back a year later, and I said, let's do some mock-ups, and then I'll see if I can get this sold in. So we did some mock-ups, and I brought it back to Jake, and he was like, oh, we're getting there. This is actually kind of cool. Don't fuck up my brand. I said, okay. So I was with the creative director of Burton at the time, and we went to San Francisco and went through a bunch of creative feasibility studies and brought the Pottery Barn team to Burlington, and they went through the archive of fabrics, materials, designs, creative imagery, and they came out with this amazing collection. So I presented it back to Jake, and he was like, wow, all right, great job. Let's do it. So we launched it it was a fall launch for back to school or August launch. So we get to November and I get this random phone call from Pottery Barn and they're like, hey, we have a problem. I said, okay, what's that? We have run out of inventory on these quilted puffs blankets. And I said, oh, that's a bummer. Can we make more? Like, we can, but we have one customer who wants to order 500 units. And I was like, really? We should probably look into that to make sure they're not going to resell it. They call me back like, oh, it's Jake Carpenter. That's not like Jake Burton, is it? I'm like, Jake Carpenter is Jake Burton. So Jake was ordering 500 units of this blanket for his Christmas presents to his family and friends. Anyway, the guy who was super freaked out about screwing up his brand was the largest consumer of the product line. But yeah, no, it was crazy. We were doing avatar sales through Microsoft, digital product. So you could dress your avatar. And we were making just crazy amounts of money off of all of this stuff. It was a great time, fun job, great people. Yeah, it was awesome. I'm really, really thankful. I got to have that experience and was able to spend that time with Burton, with Jake, and with the rest of the squad. And some of my really good friends now are my colleagues from Burton.
And with Burton, I'm sure that's how you get noticed by the SIA, or I would think that's how you get noticed by the SIA, that and the rest of your body of work. And does the interview process for the SIA president role start while you're at Burton? Or how does the ball even get rolling with the SIA?
Yeah, I ran into the chairman of SIA at a trade show, and he had just said, they're looking to make a change. And, would I be interested to interview? And at the time, I was so in my element at Burton. And I was like global guy and,
You're a rock star at that brand. It would be a hard job to leave.
It was, but I knew the culture was shifting at Burton and the timing was probably right to leave Burton. I really didn't want to leave Burton. I really liked it. There were some factors at Burton that kind of made it not so fun towards the end, but I also saw that the road was changing from pavement to dirt. And I had looked at some other jobs along the way and I really knew I had a good thing at Burton. But it's funny when you're in a role and you're like, okay, I can kind of see the road closed sign coming faster towards me than it was a while ago. It was kind of intriguing. I looked at the job and I said, well, let's look at it. So I got into the interview process and reacquainted with some old colleagues from the Alpine days. But the process was long. It was arduous. So much went into it. It lasted about 6 or 8 months. I think at one point I said, I'm out. Either you want me or you don't. How many more interviews do I have to do?
Right.
Anyway, long story short, they offered me the job. And I was trying to resign from Burton and I couldn't get anyone to meet with me. I kept calling the chairman at SIA. I'm like, dude, I'm working on it, but I can't get a meeting. Jake was sick with whatever disease he had. Anyway, Donna was dealing with him as she should have. So anyway, it took me a while to resign. And, I resigned and took 3 months off and went to Europe with my family and spent a summer in Switzerland. And then I started with SIA and it was just game on from day one, just full on.
Did you think it was crazy that the SIA was located in McLean, Virginia?
Yeah, I thought it was really strange. SIA was in McLean. And I had told them through the negotiation for compensation, I'm not moving to McLean. I'm just going to be straight with you. I'll commute, but I'm not going to live there. And the board and the hiring committee had said, well, we actually want you to relocate the office.
Oh, so that's not your idea? That was the board's idea?
That was the board's idea. And that was one of the hiring points for me was, oh, okay, well, if we're going to move the office, I'm cool with that. I'm going to move it to Burlington, Vermont.
I mean, you might as well be selfish about it, right?
Absolutely. I was living in Stowe at the time. And they're like, no. We actually want you to move it to the west, somewhere in the west. I said, all right, that's cool. I can do that. So I commuted to McLean for a year under the guidelines of you're going to move the office. So through that first year I was at SIA, I was looking at different cities around the country. So, of course, I looked at Denver. I looked at Seattle. I looked at Portland. I looked at Reno. I looked at Burlington, obviously. And nothing was really appealing to me other than Park City because there were a lot of winter outdoor brands in Salt Lake and Park City. Park City was very close to skiing, I-80, the airport, all those things kind of factored in. So we ended up choosing Utah. The state subsidized us. Park City subsidized the move. So we moved.
Yeah, they paid you like $100,000 to move, right?
I think it was more like $500,000.
Oh, dang.
I think we made $100,000. I think that was, it was something like that, but it was better than being under 100. And we separated from the staff in McLean and we sold the buildings. We had 4 different townhome style offices. We sold those at an amazing time, made a ton of money on the real estate. And we ended up buying a building right in Park City. I can see Park City Mountain Resort from my office. So it was a wonderful fit. But more importantly, we're surrounded by our members. And unlike McLean, in the year I was in McLean, I never saw one member come through Washington, D.C. And in Park City, I see 5 members just at the coffee shop in the morning. So it's been a really nice transition, a nice move. And it puts us right in the heart of the winter outdoor business.
It's time for my second round of sponsors, and while ski season is coming to a close, Elon Skis is still supporting the show because they know how important the history of this sport is. What's important to me is that you do your part by checking out Elon's site, looking at their products, and demoing a pair next season. Once you do try an Elon ski, you'll end up buying that pair as the quality and performance of Elon's products is unmatched. I'm sure you've started to see more and more Elon skis at your local hill, and the reason is because they are more fun and they're going to make you a better skier. To find out more about everything Elon and their skis, head on over to elonskis.com. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. They've been brewing the best beer in the Pacific Northwest since 2006, and they've been banging the drum about drinking 10 Barrel outside ever since. But they don't just go outside and drink. They support athletes like skiers Kate Zelef and Lucas Walks and snowboarder Ben Ferguson, mountain biker Carson Storch, and many, many more. And they don't just pay these people. They give them beer and they create content around them for all of us to enjoy. If that's not enough, 10 Barrel's Clean Line Seltzer has the perfect bubble recipe and flavors, and their cocktails in a can pack a punch. I love them. To find out more about 10 Barrel, head on over to 10barrel.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. There was an argument for McLean, Virginia. I mean, there's more skiers within a 100-mile radius of the D.C. area than all of Colorado. So there's a shit ton of skiers in that area that are going out west. But I think the most important reason for the SIA to be in the D.C. area was people took them more seriously there. It just felt a little bit more serious than if they were going to Vail or Park City. So they were there for 40 years because they were able to get stuff done with the government and the lobby and stuff like that.
For sure.
So there was a reason for them being in D.C. And while it is cooler being in Utah, it's totally a different thing. But for you being the voice and the head of the SIA, you've got all these employees there. And I don't know how many are there, maybe 20 employees at the SIA or whatever when they're in McLean. But you are the one who is voicing, I would think, the change of, hey, that we're moving. And it kind of all looks like it's you because you're the president. Do people just hate you for taking them out of the snow industry if they're not going to be moving to Utah?
Yeah, I was not a very liked person during that phase. including, one employee had a voodoo doll of me at their desk with pins in my eyes and stuff. Yeah, to be very fair, they had a very tight-knit, long-term group that had been there. Wonderful people. It wasn't personal. It was, as they say, the cliche, it's business. But they were there for a long time. They did an amazing job. And like everything around us, everything is changing. And, the business had changed. The way we were doing business has changed. And the board at the time really saw McLean and SIA as being old. And they really wanted to rejuvenate SIA, create a new look and a feel for the brand, the initiatives. So the move was part of that. So at any rate, I was the face. I was the person that was doing the hiring and the firing, the selling and the buying. It all was on my shoulders, but it wasn't on my shoulders alone.
For sure, but it looks like it is.
That's right. So at any rate, we got through that chapter.
How many made the move with you from the McLean office?
3.
Are they still with the SIA?
1.
Okay.
1 is. Yep. Majority of the staff, they were not going to move to Park City. I mean, that was just a fact. And so it wasn't a hard separation. We offered more bodies to come to Park City, but they declined, which was fine.
Is there a worry that you'll have pretty much zero institutional knowledge left at the organization? Then you are the head of it. And given you've got a lot of industry knowledge, but from what David's done at the SIA for 40 some odd years, you've shadowed him for a year and now he's out of the picture and 90% of the employees are out of the picture. Is there any fear that, hey, I don't know what happened in the past?
No, we held on to one of the employees had been there the longest and was in a very pivotal role with interaction. And she really helped kind of carry that institutional knowledge forward. And she had been there 30 something years.
Is that Debbie?
That was Debbie DeRoche.
Yeah, she's awesome.
She's awesome. One of my favorites, the biggest sweetheart. I don't talk to her as much these days, but I call her maybe once a quarter and check in with her and keep tabs on her. And David and I talked a little bit as well. And he was available, if I had any questions, but we did have a good support system.
And when you take over, it's really a pivotal time for the trade group because things are starting to change within the industry. There's a ton of consolidation with brands and brands owning brands. And I would think that's the kind of stuff that hurts the SIA, where it hurts probably most is in the trade show with multiple brands exhibiting together. Was that a hard thing to deal with? Is just the consolidation within the industry?
It wasn't hard for me because it was brand new for me. It was harder for some of the historical employees who had been around for 20, 30 years. Oh my God, there's another consolidation. There's another brand. Oh my God, there's another booth with 3 brands in it.
Right.
For me, I was looking at it. I'm like, okay, well, this is the new norm. This is what I inherited. So I was looking at it not from brand consolidation, but I was looking at it from the perspective of industry consolidation. So at our industry's height, there were 1,100 individual members of SIA who represented brands, suppliers. Right now, we're at like 700. So that consolidation has gone from 1,100 to 700. So I'm looking at the overall industry saying the industry is contracting. We've got retailers buying retailers. We've got resorts buying resorts. We've got brands buying brands. So if you were a retailer that was coming to the SIA Snow Show, you might bring 10 buyers with you. Now you are a consolidated retail group. So instead of 5,000 retailers, there's now 4,000 retailers.
Yep.
Instead of each retailer bringing 10 buyers, you got 4,000 bringing 5 buyers. It's a simple math equation. So I'm looking at the industry and the contraction. I'm also hearing from members, hey, we're at the show. Where is everybody? The show used to be much bigger. Well, this is everybody because of consolidation. The industry has shrunk. So that's where observationally people were like, well, is the show relevant anymore? Where's everybody? Nobody's coming to the show. This is the show. This is our industry. And trying to convince the industry how contraction creates a smaller footprint was more of a concern to me than retailers buying retailers, brands buying brands, resorts buying resorts.
Sure.
So again, it was a math equation. And I'm looking at a spreadsheet of the snow show which is price per square foot, membership, expense. And I'm looking at this balance sheet and I'm like, wait a minute, man, this is like a house of cards. And I started going through the what if scenario, the contingency scenarios. And I was looking at this thing, just thinking to myself, God, if we contract another 10%, the show's going to be upside down. If we contract 15%, we're going to be in deep, deep, deep doo-doo.
And the show's the number one revenue generator for all of the SIA, I would think.
That's right. It's right. So I'm sitting there just like looking at this. And all the while, I'm also looking at the markets fluctuating. I'm looking at climate change. I'm looking at other elements affecting the industry. And I keep thinking to myself, how am I going to make this work? And I'm also looking at outdoor retailer. I'm looking at that event, and that event wasn't growing either. It was kind of shrinking. So I was just like, well, wait a minute, I'm going to have to put one of my old hats on and see if I can partner with outdoor retailer to see if there's a way to enhance the trade show environment, the business. And I'm also seeing a lot of our winter brands with shoulder season products, bags, packs, clothing, footwear, bikes. And I'm like, the whole industry is merging together, whether they know it or not.
And you had some leverage when you were talking about outdoor retailer, because when the SIA show moved from Las Vegas to Denver in 2011, the deal in the contract was that the OR trade show couldn't be in Denver 30 days before or 30 days after or something like that. So OR was screwed and they could not go to Denver. And when Patagonia and a bunch of other brands were like, we cannot be in Utah supporting this show because they're not doing what we want them to do, Utah they're talking about, and we're not going to support OR if they're going to stay in Utah. OR needed to do whatever they could to get out of Utah, and partnering with you is the best way to do it because that could end that contract. But is that where you're thinking about selling the SIA trade show to OR? Because that's the way that'll make their needs happen, and it's probably a good deal for you?
I was looking at Denver, and I was looking at our relationship with Denver. And SIA had moved the snow show from Vegas to Denver. Las Vegas kicked the snow show out of town.
Yeah, that's what
we weren't spending money in that town at the levels that they needed us to spend money. So they kicked us out and they went to Denver. I got my hands on those contracts and we didn't have those 30-day non-competes in there. I created that. I was like, we need to solidify our relationship with Denver. And I was hearing that chatter. So our first year that I was president, I extended our deal 10 years with Denver. And I included a non-compete 30 days before and 30 days after because I knew the power of Emerald because they own something like 100 trade shows or something.
Yep.
So they have a lot of leverage. So I blocked them out of Denver. 1, to protect our own interest. 2, to give me leverage. And 3, I just needed some runway. And yeah, I was hearing all of this back and forth with Salt Lake. So I called up Emerald and I said, love to have a conversation with you guys. And they were very open to it. Long story short, we ended up doing a deal. It didn't happen. It didn't happen quickly. We hit a stalemate within like 3 or 4 months. And I shelved it for a year. I'm like, the timing's not right. There's too many variables in the way of this deal, kind of clearing the playing field. And I ran into the guy I was negotiating with at the airport. We ended up grabbing a beer together. And I just said, this is a simple deal. Let's get all these people out of the way. Let's you and I just negotiate this deal. So we literally penciled it out over a napkin, 3 beers. And then, we got the lawyers involved and then, we kind of rolled our sleeves up and got back into it and eventually ended up doing the deal. So it all worked out. But as part of the deal, they had to buy the Denver rights back from me since I had locked those in. So that was a good business move on my end and a good bargaining chip and good leverage to get the deal over the line. And the rest was history. We did the first show in Denver, which was arguably the best show ever, in my opinion. Man, we hit the nail on the head. It was great. It was awesome.
And I mean, I'm not going to say you sold a lemon to another lemon, but if you look at it a few years later, it kind of looks like that. But you sold at the time when you could sell it for as much as you possibly could. It was like $17 million almost when the deal closes.
Yeah.
Does it feel like you totally won? Like when you shut the door? Because you kind of see things going on within the industry. I mean, you were at Burton and you were probably there when they stopped going to these trade shows. And you could probably see LibTech not going to the trade show and realize that the industries are changing and people are doing these showrooms themselves and that the trade show is going to get less and less important. And you sell at a high, and that just has to be like a total robbery, it looks like, where you just totally screwed OR. Did you feel that way?
No. I mean,
Was there any chuckles behind the scenes on your part?
I would say a few years later, there was certainly some back pats and high-fiving my shadow when the pandemic hit.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, at the time, no, I did know it was a good deal. I did know that I still believed the show was a house of cards. I still was convinced that some variable was going to cause the industry to make a change. And I was thinking climate change, to be very fair. Rain in California, no snow in Colorado, cold and dry in New England. I'm like, that's going to just kill the fucking industry and the trade show and the business. My head was in that space. So I was happy to have sold off that show. And then I was really eager to take SIA from a trade show association to a trade association. So I was really motivated for that next phase. And certainly a year and a half or 2 years later, I guess it's 2 years later, the pandemic hits. And I think that's when I felt what you're saying, like, whoa, I just dodged a bullet. Whoa, I sold at that high. Whoa, my timing was insane. That's when I really felt that. But again, like I said, not in a million years would I have said there's going to be a global pandemic that's going to shut the business down.
No, you couldn't plan for that, but it worked out perfectly. I think in there too, is that when you bought the BWE shows as well?
That's right. Yeah, that was probably, I had a great acquisition and sale with Emerald. And then probably the timing was the worst for BWE. But our exposure was light. And I don't regret that purchase. But that was my next vision was we're living in this digital age. We're living in this direct space. I'm watching my kids on their phones. They're shopping and they're pissing and moaning about shipping. And this one company doesn't ship for free. This one company ships for free. This one does it overnight. And I'm just kind of watching them. And that's how they shop. That's how they operate. That's how they connect with their peers. So I was sitting there watching and I was like, we're going into this direct space. I know this. I bought a Ford truck through Ford.com. I found my house on Zillow. I'm like, the two biggest purchases in my life I found over the internet. And one I bought over the internet. That's where the world's going. We need to connect with consumers. We need to step away from retailers. Doesn't mean we have to abandon the old, but we have to adjust to the new. And I had been down this road before with media, content, MySpace, Facebook, Red Bull Media House. And so I was kind of drawing back on that knowledge and that experience, saying, we're going to go into this direct space. And Patagonia makes most of their money off their .com. North Face, Salomon footwear sell more shoes off their .com than they do off their retailers. So that was the impetus. I'm like, okay, we need to create a consumer platform. And I looked at BWE, I looked at the LA Ski Show, the Toronto Ski Show, Snowvana, and I was like, okay, there's a better way to do this. So we acquired BWE, and my model was, how can I take an event like Complex Con, which is footwear, denim, music, art, and create a similar environment for winter outdoor, where there's brand new product drops, there's only seen product at that one event. You make it really experiential. You make it visually intoxicating, lights, sound, music, and you create this hype around this. And I reached out to a buddy of mine who was running Complex Con and Comic Con, which Comic Con is all about comics, figures, and amazing. And he's a guy I met when he was at Mountain Dew, and we've been buddies for a long time. I said, hey, here's my vision, Complex Con, Comic Con for winter outdoor. He's like, I'm in. I want to do this with you. So I hired him. So for a year and a half, we were planning. Certainly, we got stumped with COVID in November 20. We kept planning and perfecting the model. And we got stumped in November 21 due to the COVID variant and the Delta. So we haven't produced the event yet. But long story short, I sold the consumer platform to a company out of London called Raccoon Events. And they are very much in the consumer space. I saw this on LinkedIn. I had never heard of them as of this past January. Found the CEO on LinkedIn, reached out to him. He hit me right back. Within a week, I was in London with him and his board and just presented, here's our platform. It appears you have a competing platform. We're weeks apart in Boston. We're both going to lose. So why don't we join forces? And honestly, it was like sitting next to your best friend. This guy was just salt of the earth, nicest guy. We aligned on every point, our vision, our concerns, opportunities, and it was meant to be. So we sold the platform to Raccoon. They are going to produce Snowbound for SIA. We have a long-term partnership with them. So we reduce our risk and increase our profitability. Again, another win-win deal. So we're looking forward to kicking that event off this coming November. I guess that's like 4 months away.
Yeah.
I can't wait. I'm so excited for it. We're in a great place. SIA, Raccoon is in a great place. The industry is in a great place. We're coming off of a winter with NSAA, National Skier Association, reporting 60 million plus skier visits. I mean, the excitement is there.
I would say excitement and frustration as there's a bunch of corporate consolidation, it seems like, in the past segment, but we're not going to talk about that at all. One thing I have to say about the sale to OR is, how does the sale of the SIA show to OR, how does that benefit winter sports in general?
My vision on that deal was, if we can consolidate the winter and the outdoor business into one environment, we're talking to the same retailer, we're talking to the same reps, we're talking to the same brands. It only creates a stronger commerce platform.
In theory, but that didn't happen.
That's right.
Meyer Skis is the biggest ski company at last year's trade show, which is, I don't want to say a joke because Meyer Skis makes great skis, I'm sure. I've never skied on them. But they wouldn't even be at the SIA show almost. And if they did, they'd have a 10 by 10 and they'd be an afterthought. So it's just a weird thing that the winter sports brands that are important don't have a trade show, and the trade shows that they're going to now, like there's that new show in Utah that all the brands went to, and it was a buyer show. It was what SIA used to do.
Yep.
And it shows that there's a need for something like that, but it feels like there's a hole now. At least the SIA is not involved with that anymore. And it's the trade group not providing a trade show, which is just a weird thing to me. But I mean, you sold the trade show and made a shit ton of money and saved the SIA, which, you couldn't predict the pandemic, but it all worked out well.
Yeah, right.
But like at this point, I'm trying to figure out what the SIA does for its paying members, its dues paying members, because my thought is, first, SIA's long prided themselves on the data that they help subsidize from like the MPD group that does all the market research. And I'd say nowadays the data is anecdotal mainly. I mean, the lack of the big box retailer makes the data not as important anymore, because a lot of these brands are able to get a lot of the data from the retailers and from just the people that they have internally in-house. So to me, the data wasn't as important as it used to be. And to you, what are the big pillars of the SIA that are making a difference for why people should pay dues?
Yeah. It's a great question. First, I'm going to hit on the research, because the research is still extremely important to the industry. And unfortunately, the retailers don't have the data the way that you would think they do. And it's not consolidated in a format that's useful. So that's the first issue, but also opportunity. Secondly, the suppliers still very much rely on the data. We are still producing a ton of data, whether it's wholesale sales and orders, which we have a meeting tomorrow on with all the hard good companies, whether it's our participation study, whether it's our next gen study. We are constantly creating new data sets and segments to help the industry identify new users, how often the current users are participating, what's being sold in, what's being sold out. So those are really important data points that we're still producing. We have stepped away from NPD. It wasn't as reliable as our members were hoping it to be. So we'll come out with some new data projects this fall as well.
That'll be all brand new from what people used to get?
That's right. Yep. We're still up to our eyeballs in research and data. And that is one of our primary interests in getting into the consumer show business, is so we can gain more consumer data and create more touch points and be able to take that data and put it through the SIA Vitamix and come out with more data points, more cross sections, and more segments. Again, consumer data is the most valuable data that you could have today. And that's not going to change. So that was our primary reason for getting into the consumer business. The industry research still is very valuable. A dirty secret from SIL share out on the ether is that majority of our members don't use our data because they're either intimidated by it, they don't know how to read it, they claim they don't have time to read it. But I will tell you, and I'll tell everybody else, because this is what I tell our members, your competitors are using it and they're reading it and they're learning it. We have diagrams for those that don't understand percentages. We have help desk hours where our staff walks you through the data and explains it to you if you don't understand how it works. So we've painstakingly taken steps to the weakest user to help advance that. So that's still a huge benefit and component to what we're doing.
But that sounds like it's all changing next year. Like any complaints that people had about the data in the past 10 years is different than the complaints that they'll have going forward with.
That's right. And so we're constantly adjusting that to meet the needs of our members. So we take the complaints, we take the digs very seriously, and we address those to make sure that, we are putting out a good product and good products. Climate is our number one factor in our business that is going to kill it. It's real. It's happening. Winter is 30 days less than it was 10 years ago. All the facts and figures are there in front of you. We have a whole platform called Climate United, where you can go in, and if you are brand new to figuring out how you want your company's contribution to climate change, we have a 10-step program. If you are looking at your company and looking at sustainable ways to reduce your carbon footprint, reduce your waste, we have another program for that. And again, like research and data, majority of our members think climate is a hoax. They think it's someone else's problem, or they think climate and sustainability is the same thing. So we're constantly educating our members on the differences between sustainability and climate. We're constantly updating Climate United. We have a new addition to Climate United called the Climate Lab, where we have case studies, we have videos from companies that are making a difference, helping our members figure out where they can make a difference. We have mock budgets on what it would cost you to jump in, whether it's you're dipping your big toe in or you're taking a deep dive off the 10-meter board. So we have all of that information out there. And we have, 80 plus members are taking advantage of it. We have different committees around climate and sustainability. We're working with a company right now on sustainable packaging, which we'll be able to extend to the members, get rid of all that plastic, cardboard, all the shit that comes with your product, all the Amazon shit that comes. And you're like, what the fuck is this? I just ordered a pair of socks and I've got all this packaging. We're looking and working towards reducing that.
That's got to be a challenge, because working with the brands and talking to their engineers and the people producing their products in China and saying, hey, this is the best practices that we found. And they're like, hey, you don't even make a product. You're just suggesting that we should do this, but you don't understand the increased cost to us. I can just see the nightmare that it's got to be for you and for the brands on that aspect.
It will be a nightmare. I'll be very honest with you, but look at it like this. You can work with a very credible global packaging partner who has a sustainable platform, method, opportunity, or you keep going to China and using all the plastic and littering the world for the next generation and feel good about it. Go for it. Be that guy. Be that company. Because I can tell you, my kids aren't going to buy your shit. They'll buy it once and be like, this is bullshit. Look at all this plastic. I'm done with this company. Like, you got to think about tomorrow's consumer. You got to think about, these guys are savvy. They're smart. They're not going to deal with companies that are not being environmentally friendly. And that's real. We're seeing that.
It's just unfortunate that in the corporate world, everybody cares about the bottom line more than anything else. When they're reporting to their shareholders, they want to say that they have contributed to EBITDA more, and they can do that by not spending the money on
that's right.
the packaging like they should. But you and I know that it is going to change the buying habits of people in the future. But anybody above our age, anybody 10 years older than us, that's the old guard, and they think in a different way, and you have to change those schools of thought. At this point in time, I've got one more question that I want to ask you.
Yeah, go for it.
About the OR trade show, because while
Yeah.
I was saying that you might have a chuckle a few years later after you sold the show and they are stuck with the show that's really nothing anymore, when OR makes the announcement that they're moving back to Salt Lake City, did you have a big laugh there? Like, wait, you spent $17 million to be in Denver for 5 years?
OR reached out to me and said, hey, we want introductions to Utah. I made introductions to, the outdoor rec and Visit Salt Lake and the mayor's office and the governor's office. And I was looking at it like, all right, the buying groups are already in Salt Lake. They're not coming to Denver. There's a division in the industry. We have to align the two. So my interest was to get the buying groups back into the show because that secures the retailer, that secures the brands, that secures success. So, fast forward, they say they're coming back to Salt Lake and they haven't aligned with the buying group show. So it's kind of an epic failure, unfortunately. And there's 1 week in between the shows. Look at your bottom line. If you're a buyer, you're not going to Salt Lake twice. You're going once.
Right. And you're going to do it to write your orders.
And you're going to do it to write your orders, and you're going to go where the buyers are and your brands are. So I'm disappointed that they weren't able to align with the buying groups. The buying groups wanted to align with them. I don't know what the reasoning was, to be very honest with you, and not my place to speculate, but that's unfortunate. So now we've got a rep show the 2 days before OR in Salt Lake with WWSRA, which is the Western Ski Rep Association. And then we've got OR. And then we have 5 days, and then it's the buying group show, WSM, Winter Sport Market. So yeah, there's a big snafu with those three elements. And certainly the hard good brands, from what I'm hearing, they're going to be attending the Winter Sport Market.
Yep.
Their reps will be attending the WWSRA show. So that leaves a void at the Winter OR show. Hey, at the end of the day, I want this thing to come together. I don't want this fracturing. And the industry is stronger when we're together. We know it. We've experienced it in the past. So I think OR is going to have some growing pains in Salt Lake. I think there'll be a lot of outdoor brands that will boycott. The majority of the winter brands will be going to WSM. So I don't know who's going to be going to Outdoor Retailer Snow Show. In a perfect world, I would love for us to all come together and create something new and vibrant that really is different from a convention style trade show and really promotes the industry, promotes how great the outdoor business is. And honestly, how great Salt Lake is. I get the issue at Bears Ears. Personally, I'm not a fan, but professionally, we have a voice and we're stronger when we use it as opposed to running away and boycotting. So at any rate, there's a huge opportunity in front of us, but we have to kind of put the political swords down. We need to put the corporate shields down, and we need to get in a room and figure it out. Otherwise, it's going to be a short run.
All right. Well, that is the podcast. And at this point, I have something that I call inappropriate questions. And I get someone that to ask 3 questions that can be anything. And I was able to get a legend within the industry, the president and CEO of the Technica Group, Chris Licata. He's an industry OG who happens to be a longtime friend of yours. And Chris was nice enough to come up with 3 inappropriate questions for you. And I'm going to play question number 1 for you right now.
So, Nick, you spent your formative years in the ski industry doing race service for Dynastar and Lang. This no doubt means that you have ruckused and terrorized government camp for multiple summers. So what is the craziest thing you did while you were there? And please don't give us any lame answers about being thrown out of a bar or two.
Oh man, government camp. If you were a product of the ski industry in the 80s and 90s, you were spending a lot of time at government camp, whether you liked it or not. Man, well, there's a great bar at government camp. And I know Chris had mentioned, I don't want to hear about getting thrown out. It's called Charlie's.
Yep.
And Charlie would sit at the end of the bar. And on most nights, he was passed out in his chair. And the bartender, I can't remember his name, but we all knew him at the time. And he would always put a fresh drink in front of Charlie. But one night, all the reps were at this bar having some drinks. And every rep who had a van was parked right in front, like uniformed. Technica, Vocal, Rosignol, Dynastar, whatever. And there was a mix of lagers and ski reps in there. And like anything, there was a shuffle in the back, a disagreement. Some fists were thrown, and this logger comes out of I don't even know where he came from, with a baseball bat. And he went out and he hit every van, every light, mirror, windshield, side window in rapid succession. And my van happened to be the last one in the lineup. So I wasn't thrown out of the bar, but I jumped through a window over the deck, got in the van, and did like the reverse peel out. I couldn't imagine how I would explain that to my boss. And I thought that would be the end of me. I don't know if that was the craziest time, but it was just a memorable night where 5 or 6 reps vans got completely throttled. And I don't even know what happened after that. I went back to our house and that was called it a night. But government camp was great, though. What a fun place to be.
All right, we will go with question number 2.
Nick, describe for the audience in vivid detail your most memorable mixed doubles tennis match.
So this has got to be an inside joke.
Mixed doubles tennis. My brain is running hard right now. I don't recall any mixed double tennis match. That's a good question, Chris. I might have to follow you up on that one.
Well, we've gone long on this podcast, so we're going to give you a pass there. We're going to jump right into question number 3. So we'll go with this final inappropriate question.
So it's a question and a statement. So Nick, you are a complex individual. I see you as sort of the ultimate guy's guy. You grew up in northern Vermont. You're super, super competitive. You drive a truck. You are obsessed with your family's maple sugaring business. Yet you have a closet full of Prada, Golden Goose, and wooden cow-eyed clogs, and have been known to drink a fair amount of Sauvignon Blanc. Please explain how this happens.
The juxtaposition of Nick Sargent.
Oh my God, the complexity that I call myself. Oh man, that's a funny one. Yeah, I am Vermonter deep down, through and through. But my mother was from New York City and my dad was from Vermont. We had the Green Acre thing as kids. And my mom was always making sure that we were dressed impeccably well with designer clothing, maybe to a fault. So that quality of fashion has never really left my person. But the Sauvignon Blanc is a good one. At Burton, the drink of choice was Jack Daniels. And I drank a lot of Jack Daniels trying to fit in with the Burton executive team. And when I left Burton, I stopped drinking for a few months. I'm like, I'm done with Jack Daniels, Don Julio. I'm not doing any of that anymore. And then I slowly started getting into the Sauvignon Blanc as a way to have a social cocktail and a social drink. And so that's kind of stuck with me over time. So I am a Sauvignon Blanc drinker through and through. And that's about all I drink.
All right. So that was Inappropriate Questions, and that's the podcast. And you've done so much in your career. And while I look at most of your jobs like they were safe, you were working for brands and making a difference for them. But your current role is one that puts you in the spotlight for a whole industry. And I feel like it's a risky job to take. Like you've made a lot of key moves to the organization. And while it might not be fair, people are going to remember you for your career and the success or failure at the SIA. So I wish you good luck in navigating these challenging waters. And I thank you for your time.
Thanks a lot. It was great. I really appreciate it.
So that was time with Nick Sargent. And like I've mentioned, he's had such a great career. But it will be judged by what he does with the SIA. And from what I see now, he's sold the #1 revenue generator that they had. And who knows, by doing that, maybe he kept the SIA alive. So that's a positive thing. But what I can't figure out is what the SIA does for brands and the sport. I know Nick mentioned the data, but that's unproven, as it sounds like the old data sucked and they are trying to create some better and more relevant data for the brands and retailers. He also mentioned the help desk that they were creating to help brands and retailers understand the data. I guess that's a great thing too. I never really thought of the help desk as a pillar, but it's something that they're building at the SIA for their members. They're also focused on climate change. And the whole packaging thing was interesting to me because brands should want to do this on their own. And best practices say that if you produce your product in-house with insanely smart engineers, they should be able to build sustainable packaging too. You shouldn't need a third party if you have the right people in place. Especially if sales and marketing are listening to what your customers want and need, which to me is the most important way to ensure your product sells. then your brand will be doing that and delivering product in sustainable packaging. So while climate change is a pillar for them, I'm still not sure what they are doing to really impact that. When the group was in the DC area, they would lobby the government around issues that impact the sport. That seems to be a thing of the past, so I don't know what's happening with that pillar. Another pillar that I see in emails a lot is that the SIA is positioning themselves as a champion for diversity in the industry. That didn't come up in our conversation, and really, I'm not sure how a trade group can have a huge impact here. That sounds like an industry-wide marketing problem that won't be solved with panels at a trade show. It's going to be solved by hiring the right people and creative marketing programs. So after talking to Nick, it seems to me that the SIA is going in a different direction. Instead of being the trade show for the brands and the retailers, they are partnering with a consumer show. And I guess this November will ultimately show if that line of thinking is a success or a failure. And really, none of this is a knock on Nick. He's had an amazing career, as I've mentioned, and he took a huge risk by taking the SIA gig. And while it's too early to say if the moves that he's made are positive or negative for the SIA, the one thing I can say is that the SIA is still around, and Nick is a big reason why. And now it's up to him to keep the SIA relevant. That's the show for this week. I want to thank you for listening, ask you to subscribe and review me wherever you listen, and please support my amazing sponsors. They are Stanley, the 10 Barrel Brewery, Elon Skis, Rollerblade, and Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Have a great week, everyone.